Hello and welcome to the Ruth MacFit podcast, where we chat all things health, fitness, nutrition, and how to build habits that actually work with your life. Now, if you're enjoying these episodes, then it really helps if you like and you subscribe. And I absolutely love hearing from you. So please do leave a comment, maybe a 5-star review, and let me know what has resonated with you. Right, let's get into today's episode. Hello, welcome back. Always happy to be here with you. Today is no exception because we're talking about one of the subjects I'm most passionate about, and that is how to lose weight without losing your mind. Because I think a lot of you can feel like it's all consuming and super stressful. In fact, I think a lot of you might be in that place where you want to lose weight, but the thought of going on yet another diet fills you full of dread. And we often talk about yo-yo dieting and the all or nothing. But I think it can go a step further than that, because I think a lot of you, and I definitely was in this situation years ago, and it's probably what helped me maintain weight and not get to kind of an excess of weight, is that we feel like we're always on a diet. So we'll be dieting pretty hard. And the periods of time where we're off a diet are so short, but they're enough to either keep us at maintenance or very slowly gaining, that it feels like we're focused on it all the time. And it's super demoralizing. It feels shit. And it can have us wondering what is wrong with us. Maybe because we're expecting results too quickly. I know that I thought that in hindsight, that could be where I was. So it wasn't working. So I'd go, oh, fine, fuck it. I'll start again on Monday. But for whatever reason, that's the situation we can be in. And then the thought of working hard for fat loss feels awful. So my intention today is to bring you some clarity around this so that you can understand what weight loss is and what it isn't, and weight gain as well. And then the things that make it harder and what we can do to make it easier so that we can feel good in the process as well. This is what I'm all about, making it feel easier. Now, I think it would be important to start by discussing the fact that it is not a level playing field. When we're starting with a weight loss journey or fat loss journey, we're not all starting from the same place. And I don't just mean not starting from the same place in the sense that physically we might be bigger or we might be less fit or less able to do certain exercises. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the other things, our history, the things that mean that we've got more baggage behind us that can be a little bit harder because we've got to unlearn some more habits, which I'll discuss in a moment. But it's why it's so important that we don't compare our journey with others and why we don't judge others on how far they've come or not come. It's why I get super annoyed when I see coaches spouting like no bullshit, no excuses and advice that you've just got to work harder. And there doesn't seem to be much empathy there, because most people, it's not that they're not working hard enough. In fact, I would argue that often they're working too hard. And that sort of advice is not going to be helpful at all for sustaining fat loss. Anyway, I could probably do a whole episode on that alone, but we won't. But when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the fact that it can go right back to childhood before we're even aware that we are conscious of calories and health, anything like that. It can go back to then, because it might be that you were brought up in a family that were very health conscious, home cooked meals, activity was something you prioritize, and you're just kind of dragged along and those are your role models. And then you might have another family who, perhaps due to ill health or inactivity, whatever it is, they're eating more for convenience and they're not going to be moving so much. And then the children around them obviously aren't going to be able to do that either. Again, it's not any ill intention, it's the situation they're in. But going further than that, we also have the things and the messaging around food scarcity, not wasting food, don't leave anything on your plate. That was something I used to feel terrible about for years and years and years. Then we have the messages around dieting around us. People were worried about their weight or tracking calories all the time, and what dieting looked like as an outsider at that point in our life. And then let's not forget that a lot of us would have been subject to that kind of 90s heroin chic messaging of being as thin as possible. I remember, and it might have been the 90s, it might have even been like early 2000s, but it was the size 0 thing. Everyone needed to be a size 0. Now, if I'd got to a size 0, which is a UK 4, I believe, then something has gone very, very wrong. Because even when I sat at a size 8, I was arguably too thin for me. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that some people are going to find that they put on a bit of weight And then they go, oh, I could do with losing weight. They hear what they need to do and they go, fine, I'll go and do that. And it works. And it's annoying if you're not like that. But for other people, it's going to feel like they're unpacking years of messaging, of behavior that they've got used to. And they're having to make change in a way that feels doable for them. And it can feel like they're having to change quite a lot, quite quickly. And I found this really, really hard to believe when I heard it years ago. Some people really don't get the same pleasure from food as others. Like they're not that bothered. It really doesn't give them that same kind of feelings of reward or that kind of dopamine hit, I guess you get from it. But they're just not that bothered about food. And maybe that comes down to the ghrelin and leptin, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. But ghrelin and leptin are hunger hormones. Ghrelin being the one that makes us feel hungry. It's telling us we want to eat. I remember this by grrr, I'm hungry, ghrelin. And then leptin is the one that indicates satiety, that we're full, that we've had enough. I'll talk about some of the other areas that can make a difference to our leptin and ghrelin. But it is worth saying at this point, when we're talking about that level playing field, that there are another couple of areas where they can be impacted. If you have a long dieting history, and here we're thinking repeated cycles of restriction, that can lead to stronger signals and reduced satiety. And the other area is those starting with a higher body fat point. While their body might produce a decent amount of leptin, that satiety hormone, they can have reduced sensitivity to it, often called leptin sensitivity. And that can mean that the brain doesn't hear the fullness signal clearly, and it's much easier then to eat beyond fullness. So let's talk about what weight loss actually is. And you've probably heard it before as you expend more calories than you consume. There we go. End of podcast. If only it were that simple. And actually another way, of course, of putting it would be eat less, exercise more. But of course, that is missing so many nuances. And also there's a danger there that you start exercising only in order to lose weight. And we're going to talk about that now because that is not the way to look at it either. But it is basically eating a little bit less and expending a little bit more is a general premise. So really, we want to make those things easier to do because there can be some very simple ways of doing this. So it doesn't feel as hard as perhaps we've been making it. If we look at it just at those two things, then we can just think, reduce what I'm currently doing now. But what you're currently doing now might be making it harder for you. Now, I thought these sorts of posts were done, but I have seen a few of them recently where people were saying to burn off this chocolate bar, you would need to do this much exercise. And this isn't true at all. Actually, to burn off that chocolate bar, you could do absolutely nothing at all if you chose to eat that chocolate bar. And the reason for this is because most of the calories that we burn come from our BMR, our basal metabolic rate. Now, that is the amount of energy you use just being alive, those life-sustaining activities. Here we're thinking breathing, circulation, and cell production when at complete rest. Nothing else. You're not doing anything else. And that actually accounts for about 60 to 70% of the calories you take in or the energy you expend. So energy and calories we're kind of looking at as the same thing here. The next thing that we have is NEAT. That's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Now that is any movement that you're doing that isn't exercise. So me sitting here fiddling like this, that is going to count as NEAT. We've also got getting up, walking to the fridge. We've got going and picking up some of the washing, those daily little activities, just moving around throughout the day, not exercising. That is going to account for approximately 15 to 20%. Now, don't try and work these out because they're not going to add up to 100 because they're different for everyone. But what I want you to get from this is the fact that the biggest number is the BMR. Then you have your NEAT. And then we have our exercise, which is like 5 to 10%, 15% max. And that is the planned workouts, what you're doing when you're going for a run, when you're in the gym training, when you're doing that sort of cardio, that type of thing. 5 to 15%. And for most, I think it's going to be 5 to 10%. And then we have thermic effect of our food, which they say is around 10% of the total energy we're using. And this is the energy used to digest and metabolize and absorb the food that we're eating. And not all foods are created equal. So protein, we're looking at about 20 to 30% of the food that we take in that's protein based being used to digest that food. With carbs, it's more like 5 to 10%. And then with fats, it's like 0 to 3%. I wouldn't worry too much about the thermic effect of food, but it does also indicate the fact that if you have a fat loss goal, there are other reasons than supporting your muscle health and so on that you might want to go for a higher protein diet. And actually, fiber, which isn't one of the main macros, it's a micro, is also going to have a higher thermic effect. But basically, that's it. The thermic effect does also count in how we expending those calories throughout the day. And actually, an interesting point about NEAT is that when we're going lower in calories and we're restricting, those are the sorts of movements that you don't necessarily notice, but our body is very good at conserving energy if you're in a deficit. And sometimes that NEAT can drop down because it's trying to keep the status quo. It's looking after you. So you might find that you actually start moving a little bit less when you're in a deficit. And that's why things like monitoring steps and so on can be helpful, because our body is going to try and preserve as much as it can. And weight gain, of course, is the opposite. This is when we are going to be consuming more than we are expending. But the thing about weight gain is it can happen over many months, years, and sometimes it's not even enough that you'd notice the difference really between being at maintenance and then a slight excess. Is just a small amount. This might be slightly larger portions in your meals. Maybe you're moving a little bit less. And over time, that can just mean that you're creeping up to being in a very slight excess of calories. But obviously, we're okay about gaining weight slowly. We don't want to lose it slowly like that. Now, if I think about the calories I could go on in order to be in a deficit, a decent deficit, lose weight, I could be looking at 1,800 calories. And I could share what I'm going to eat in a day with you on social media. And you could think, right, okay, fine. I'm going to do exactly the same as Ruth and I will get to wherever I want to be. But the point I want to say here is you might not be the same weight, height, and activity levels as me. And because of this, you could either end up in too much of a deficit or not enough. So for some people, 1,800 calories is going to be too many to be in a deficit. And for others, it's going to be not enough calories. We need to be looking at us, what we can manage. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about calorie counting, tracking, and so on, and what we can do to help that. But before we do, I think it's important to now talk about the nuance. So that is what weight loss and weight gain is, but it hasn't taken in consideration the nuance, what is going on in your life outside of this. For a start, I doubt very much that fat loss is the only thing going on in your life. It is also unlikely to be the only thing that is important to you. And I think when we're setting goals, it's very easy to kind of go, yes, I can and should be able to manage all of this because I have the time, I work these hours, I can fit it in then. But we are human. There are going to be other things that we want to do, like seeing our friends occasionally, spending time with our family, going out maybe for dinner, whatever it is, going on holiday for start. These things are going to be important to us too. And while you might think, well, I've got a clear run of it at the moment, I can put those things on hold until then, we don't always take account as to what happens until then. You know, what happens at that point, because that's often where things can go a bit awry. And it's very, very unlikely that life is going to be the same every day at this stage of life. I don't think it's the same every day at any stage of life, but I do know that in my 20s, when I didn't really have anyone to think about other than myself, it was much easier because decision fatigue is lower. I'm feeling pretty cool. I can go out if I want to go out. I can choose to eat a little bit less if I want to choose to eat a little bit less. There's not other people to think about all around me. And I wasn't working in the same way that I'd be working now. And that external stress that we might have now and pressure that we might have, or the pressure we put on ourselves as well, can make it harder too. And when we were talking about leptin and ghrelin earlier, stress can absolutely make a difference to our hunger and satiety hormones, to how we're feeling about food. So when you're feeling a little bit more stressed, you're likely going to be feeling a bit hungrier too. I know that is the case for me, 100%. And that's the same with sleep. Sleep is exactly the same. When we haven't had enough sleep, we might find that our hunger increases. And not only does our hunger increase, our cognitive function feels a little bit lower. We're unable to really focus. So then we find that we are not able to make those choices. We're just kind of reacting day by day. So that is another nuance, I'd say, the fact that we get into this state of just reacting instead of giving ourselves time to make those calm choices. And of course, I would be remiss to not mention that at this stage of life, we also have those hormonal fluctuations that can be happening as well, which can also impact our hunger hormones and satiety levels, which again can make it feel a little bit harder. That isn't saying it's impossible. We'll talk about those and how to make it easier in a moment. But along with this, because we're finding it harder and we're finding it hard to stick to, instead of focusing on the things that will make it easier, we often then just pile on more pressure. And when it doesn't work, each time it doesn't work, we lose a little bit of belief in ourselves that it will. And that belief is very key to us having that success. In fact, one of my members recently, one of the wins that she celebrated, I think it might have been last Friday, but one of the wins that she celebrated was the fact that she suddenly felt clearer on her goals. And she talked about how she could see how she could achieve them now. And that belief helps with the commitment to the things that she needs to do. It makes such a positive impact. If we are saying we'll do things, but there's part of us going, I've tried this before and it didn't work, then we're kind of starting on the back foot already. So number one, believe that you can do it. Think about how you're talking to yourself, because we can be really quite mean to ourselves. And that self-doubt, I want you to challenge it, because there is no reason at all why you can't. It just might be that you haven't managed it with your old approach because you were trying too hard. You're trying so hard. You weren't taking in account that life isn't the same every day, and there weren't backup options, which I'm going to help you with in a moment. If I think about my most successful members, they are just calmly trusting the process and doing what they can. And there are some common themes around things that can make it harder that we do without thinking. But some of them are such easy, quick changes that they can make a massive difference, such a big difference, because often we're relying on willpower to keep us going with fat loss, where in fact, it's not the willpower that we need. It's just a few tweaks earlier on in the day. Because often, if we think about those messages that we think about that we've grown up alongside, we have this view of what a diet should look like. We feel it should be quite hard. And if it doesn't feel really, really hard, then we think we need to make it harder. Or if we're in a role and we're like, oh, I've done a couple of weeks like this, I could probably push for more now. We then push for more a bit too quickly. We also look to make every meal as low calorie as possible. Now, I am going to blame the diet culture in the past for showing us what meals should look like, basically rabbit food, or those crazy diets. There was British Heart Foundation diet that my sister did, which was like you had to have ice cream and something on this day. It was bizarre. It was really bizarre. And then wasn't like cabbage soup diet. It's all the things that are eat as little as possible. And I spoke about it on a recent podcast, how I would sit in the staff room when I was a teacher. And then prior to being a teacher before uni, I worked in social services. And I remember being there in the staff room, and the people that were on diets would bring in these lunches that were tiny, like little tiny bowls of salads, maybe a few rice cakes and veggie sticks, and they would eat that. And they would do that for a little while until they obviously couldn't maintain doing that anymore. But that is what we think diet food should look like. But actually, if we start eating a little bit more in our meals, that need to snack in the evening that we've been relying on willpower to stop gets a lot easier. Obviously, hunger hormones can be a little bit higher when we're just starting dieting like this, or we're going into that restriction again. But if we're eating plenty of protein, think about the thermic effect as well, plenty of protein, plenty of fiber in our breakfast, our lunch, and our evening meal, that can help with the snacking later in the day. And actually, sometimes it really is just that breakfast. Women will suddenly start having breakfast, start including protein, and immediately they're finding it easier to not pick. Or they get into the routine of thinking, I know that I had that extra thing, but that doesn't mean I need to skip lunch. Best thing long term is going to be to just get back into the routine as quickly as possible, so you're not just picking throughout the day. Another thing that can definitely make it harder is that feeling of overwhelm. And so many times I'll talk to women who will say that they are struggling, they're feeling a bit kind of fuck it, coming in, that bubbling feeling. And whenever I get that feeling with whatever it is, because it doesn't need to be food, if I'm getting that feeling, I know it's a sign that I need to stop. I don't need to suddenly just start adding more and, oh gosh, I need to do more because I'm chasing that result. Whenever I start feeling like I'm chasing a result, then I need to stop and then have a plan. And I was talking to a member a few days ago, in fact, who said to me that she'd thought it was hormonal, but she was starting to feel these bubbling feelings again. But it seems to be earlier than normal because she does struggle a bit in the days leading up to her period. I said, you've just been away for the weekend and you didn't get that time on Sunday to feel mentally clear about the week. Have you taken that time? Today, it's probably this. So if you think about the minimums that you find easier to do, that's doing some form of movement each day, just having a plan for your food. And she sent me a message today saying it was that. I was just feeling overwhelmed because I've been away, because now I've done those things, I'm feeling so much better. So if you are finding yourself feeling overwhelmed and you're chasing to do more and more so you can get to that result quicker, just stop for a moment, because it's likely that you just need to get everything out your head onto paper, have a plan. And finally, not having a plan of any description can be one of the biggest things that makes it harder. We can be winging it. We can say, tomorrow I need to stick to my calories, but we have no idea how we're going to do that at all. And I definitely used to do this. I used to get given a calorie to aim for. I'd go on a diet. I'd be like, right, I'm going to aim for that. And obviously it would be way too low for what I actually needed to do. I don't know what I was using for my calories back then, but bear in mind that I'm just over 5'7". I'm not like super light. I'm quite active, and it was giving me like 1,200 calories. Anyway, I would try and stick to this, but that would be my plan. Tomorrow I need to stick to 1,200 calories, and then I'd fail at 1,200 calories. And so then I'd do the same again the next day. But if you have an idea of what that could look like, even if it's having some go-to breakfasts and lunches, and then having those in your mind, just reducing that decision fatigue so that you're not winging it, then you know anything else that you choose to do, anything else that comes up can be a calm choice. Anything you do, honestly, making a choice feels so much better than reacting. If you decide to have something that's more indulgent, if I think about the no crap cake condition that I often talk about, the whole point of that is making a choice, not a reaction. You can have anything that you want, even on a fat loss goal, but know where it fits with your goal, because the aim is to be consistent over time. And if we're struggling with consistency, it could be that we are more often than not having those more indulgent foods because they're feeling like they're scarce. They're feeling like we can't have them. We're like, oh shit, I've done it again. And we're picking at the things that we're not even that bothered about, or eating the soggy crusts of the children's plate. Like, that is not a meal for a start, because often people will pick at their children's leftovers and not eat a meal themselves, and then struggle to sustain the weight loss or the progress that they've been making. So make choices. Use the no crap cake condition. Think less often, more endurable. Is this something that I really do want and love? Is there something I'd like more at a different time? Am I actually going to be able to sit down and enjoy this now? Or is there going to be a time where I'll enjoy it more? I remember years ago, I used to drink quite a lot of Coke. I think it was just energy to get through the day. I'm thinking right back to likely when my first boy was born, and I would drink Coke, and I didn't want to drink Coke. So then I started doing this thing where I'd buy it and I'd say to myself, I can have it later if I really want it. And then when I got to later, I'd be like, I don't really think I really want it now. I'll have it tomorrow if I really want it. And this would continue. And it just really helped me back then. And I think that kind of is the no crap cake condition. Now I don't feel the need to have Coke, but it is something that I think we can have in our mind. It's not saying I can't have it. It's saying, is this the time that I really want it? And am I going to be able to enjoy it? And the other area I really need to talk about in this things that can make it feel harder is how we track our progress, how we measure our progress. Now, I'll often talk about a book called The Gap and the Gain, and they talk about in that book, it's Dan Sullivan and somebody else, Benjamin Hardy, I think it is. Anyway, they talk about in this book how when you're in the gap, you're focused on where you want to be. You're outcome focused. You're just, until you're there, you haven't achieved anything. So you've got this idea of where you want to be, and you're not being able to look at how far you've come at all. When we're in the gain, we're measuring our progress. So we're measuring kind of backwards. We're looking at how far we've come since we started this journey. And I'm making it clear on that because this is something else that can make it harder for people, is when you are looking constantly back at where you used to be and comparing yourself all the time to, I used to be able to do this. I used to be thinner. I used to be able to fit into those trousers. We're talking about starting where you are now. And the reason I know that you might struggle with this is because I used to struggle with it a lot. And I'm not just talking about my size. I'm talking about my fitness levels. I would constantly compare myself to what I was able to do with running for a start. And it's easy to fall into, but that ruined running for me. It wasn't making me any quicker because I would go out, I would try and run the same speed that I used to be able to run when I was faster, pretty much die, hate the run, hate how I felt afterwards. Recovery was slow. And then I repeat and try again. And then it got to the point where I was like, I don't think I can run anymore. My recovery is just so awful. And then I realized I was trying too hard. Now, for me, I set an intention of every run is just to come back feeling better than I did when I went out. So I would strip it right back and I would let myself go slower, walk if I needed to walk. The same can be applied to a fat loss journey. Often the times that we're feeling really fed up with it, it's because we are trying so hard, thinking about it so much. And then we can go, okay, how can I make this more enjoyable? And that can be a massive key to making change. It made such a difference with my running, and it's something I've applied in loads of other areas too. And I think when we feel better in one area, it trickles into other areas. Can you tell that this podcast is just coming out of my head? It's just me talking to you about something I feel so strongly about. But the other thing with measuring progress is choosing how we're going to measure it, right? So it might be that you've been using scale weight. The danger with using the scales is that they are going to fluctuate. And if you are in midlife and you're perimenopausal, you can get those massive fluctuations anyway. You might hold a bit more information at sometimes, or water. All of these things can make a difference, but it's not body fat. But when we see that scale go up, and normally it decides to go up at a time where mentally we're feeling a bit like fed up. So the scale goes up, we're feeling a bit lower, and that can be enough to go, what even is the point? Now, you can use the scales. They are a good indication over time. You know, you do want to see them. They should go down over time if you've got a fat loss goal. I don't think they should be your only form of measurement. Not only do we want to look at the progress you're making, but if we're thinking about progress in terms of those numbers, you can look at other things too. You can look at the strength you're gaining if you're doing your workouts, if you're tracking your reps there. You can do body measurements if you like. That, along with the weight, if fat loss is a goal, could be really useful, as can photos. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Whenever I decide that I want to lose a little bit of weight, I just do my waist measurement. And I don't do it that often, but it's just enough for me to go, okay, this is where I am. And then in a month's time, I do it again. And that's because the scales mean less to me now. I definitely want to go more on how I'm feeling and how my clothes fit. But I do sometimes find it handy to look at a number. But that's just me. And obviously we can still get bloating and that can still fluctuate, but not in quite the same way as your weight can. Now, if you do want to use scale weight, another way to look at it to adjust for those fluctuations is to weigh every single day. If you're not somebody that's going to get really demoralized by the weight, weigh every single day, look at the lightest weight of each week, and then track your progress over time. Because unless you're suddenly, you know, your calories are doing this and you're suddenly massively overeating over the days after you've weighed, then the lowest of the week should be the one that you want to look at, because it's very unlikely that you'll get a false low reading unless you've been very sick and very dehydrated. But you can easily get that false high reading because of water and so on. So you can do that. The other option is to weigh monthly and then weigh for a few days and see where you are then. I can go up by about 2 kilograms overnight, which is quite a lot, but I can go up by 2 kilograms overnight. So just bear that in mind. It can fluctuate wildly, and it would be very impressive if you had managed to gain that much body fat overnight. There is this whole talk about it's like 3,500 calories over maintenance for 1 pound of body fat. Now, that isn't taking into account any activity levels or anything like that. But say that is the case for everyone. Say it was that blanket rule. If that were the case, if I gained 2 kilograms of body fat overnight, I would have been eating 15,400 calories. It's quite impressive, isn't it? Over my maintenance. This isn't even over the deficit. I don't even think I could do that. And I do love food. You know, I live in a foodie family. So just bear that in mind. Often we can really put a lot of emphasis on what one meal can do, but one meal on its own rarely is going to have this massive impact. What often happens is we feel like that one meal has made this big impact. And so we then let that continue for a few days and think, fine, I'll start again on Monday. But if we can be sensibly mindful in that meal, not completely hit fuck it, and then get back into routine as soon as possible, then it's fine. And actually, even if you did completely hit fuck it in that meal, over the course of time, like I have members that go out for their 3-course meals, and sometimes they'll be like, I just had everything, or taste a menu, I just had everything, because they understand that in the grand scheme of things, that is not happening very often at all. They want to enjoy it. They can get back into their normal routine the next day. Brilliant. And there are things that can make that easier as well. If you know you're going out, you're going to have a late night, going to have a few drinks, likely you're going to be feeling a bit tired the next day. So anything you can do to make that day easier in advance is going to be a bonus as well. And actually, we're talking about making it easier. It is kind of time for me to move on a little bit more on what strategies really can make it feel calmer for you. Because I said losing weight without losing your mind. And actually, just a little thing that I should mention here, I flip between saying weight loss and fat loss. And the only reason for that is because I think most of you are looking for fat loss. We say weight loss, but that obviously does indicate the weight on the scales, which can fluctuate wildly over time. Fat loss is going to be the loss of body fat, which is what you're more likely kind of visibly going to see. And that's when taking those progress pictures, if you're brave enough, can be really useful. It can be really awful to look at them because we never like looking at ourselves at the beginning. But then when you can see how much progress you've made, it can be quite rewarding. I remember working with a lady, and that was, well, she never actually weighed herself at all. Even when she signed up, she said that she just guessed her weight so that I could set her calories. And then throughout the journey, she just took these pictures monthly and just stuck with focusing on what she could do each day. And oh my goodness, she looked like a completely different woman. But we had no idea what her starting weight was, and it didn't matter. Did not matter one little bit. But when we're talking about making it easier, really it comes down to having this flexibility so that it can fit with your life. It is so easy to be given this plan, to be given a set calories that you're going to be aiming for, not just calories that you're going to be aiming for. And to feel like you failed if you haven't done that. There is no flexibility for if the kids are sick, if you are really tired and hormonal, if you've suddenly got to drop everything and run, for whatever reason. Life is not going to be the same every day, and it doesn't need to be. But I think a lot of the plans that we choose to do, or the things we think we can do, are for the great days. And I think we can have that in mind. And one of the ways that you can do this is to spend a little bit of time thinking about your goals. So say your outcome, that outcome you want in the future is for fat loss. And for whatever reason that might be, it might be that you want to lose weight because you want to feel better in your clothes, like whatever it is, only you know why that feels important to you. And I think it is a valid reason, and it's okay to want to lose weight. But then what you need to do is think about what you can commit to, the things that you think you should do in order to get there. And these will be your weekly or your daily actions. It might be workout based. It might be movement based with walking and so on. It might be around nutrition, and it might be around mindset. So I kind of like the idea of thinking of one in each area, but you then think about what you can do. Then you ask yourself, okay, I feel like I need to do 3 workouts a week, or I need to hit 8,000 steps or 10,000 steps a day on average, or I need to be hitting this certain number of calories. And then you ask yourself, can I manage that on a day where I'm feeling really tired, really busy, where I'm not feeling 100%? Is that possible? And if the answer is no, then you look at them again and you think, okay, well, what could I manage on those days? And you then have a plan for those. So you have those push goals. You think, yeah, I should be able to do those. And those are what I'm going to aim for. They're like my optimal fat loss aiming thing. That's what I'm going to go for. But I'm going to also set these other ones. Now, those other ones might not look optimal for fat loss to you. But the thing to consider here is that action itself can create motivation. So doing these little small things, even if they might not seem enough to you, are not only keeping you in the game, but they're also helping you stay motivated. You're doing something. You're proud of the progress you're making. Those are the things that you'll say that you can do. If I think about any habit that I've really stuck to, it's because I've got a condensed version of it. So if I'm thinking about winding down in the evening, and this is more of a mindset habit, we'll talk about these sorts of things, but I get my tea ready for the morning. I do one thing. I then have a few things that I really do like to do, but I have that one thing as my minimum. And I've got members in the area at the moment. We're doing PJ workouts every morning. I go live with members at 6:30 in the morning, and we do 5 to 10 minutes of movement. It's body weight or using a band. It's nothing strenuous because we want to be able to do it in our PJs when we haven't really warmed up. But the members that have been doing this as their minimum are finding that they're then motivated to do more later on. So again, when you're thinking about those minimums that you can commit to, they don't need to be big, but they do need to be the thing that you mainly commit to. So that on those tired days when you're like, I said that I was going to do 12,000 steps a day, whatever it is, and I can't manage it, you say to yourself, okay, I don't feel like doing that, but I know that I can go manage a 10-minute walk, so I'm going to do that instead. You have the if or kind of conditions. If I can't do that, then I'll always do this. So breaking down, this is where I want to get to. These are the actions I want to do that I think are optimal for fat loss. And when I can't manage those, I am still going to absolutely commit to these so that I can stay consistent. And then with calories, those of you that have listened to me for a while will know that I love to use calorie ranges. And the reason I use calorie ranges is because it helps with that all or nothing thinking. But, and here's a big but, it is worth remembering that tracking calories in itself is likely an optimal thing, that you will only manage on the days where you're feeling good, where life's kind of normal. It might be that you are finding at the moment you're tracking your calories Monday to Friday, but you don't track over the weekend. And the weekend can be a little bit more fuck it behaviorish. So then that's something you can learn from. You've got a pattern there. You know that you're not going to track calories when life is in the air. So can you set some of those minimums when you're not tracking calories? Like, I'm going to have a high protein breakfast as a minimum, and I'm going to follow the no crap cake condition. I mean, I'm just picking them. You have to think about what happens on your weekends or the times when you're not able to do it, and think about what can help you stay in the game so you're not hitting fuck it, even if things are a little bit more flexible. And that is the other thing actually to take into consideration, is that there'll be some times where you don't want to focus on fat loss, or you don't feel like you can focus on fat loss. And that is also okay. But those minimums then act as the thing that keep you in the game, keep you going, so that you're not giving up, so that when you do feel ready to push again, that you can, and you're not starting or feeling like you're starting from the beginning. So you're not on that on or off cycle anymore. You're just focusing on gaining those habits that make you feel good, have you feeling calm. And actually, you might well find that even though you think you're not fully focused on fat loss, it's still happening with those things in place. But the main thing about the calorie range and why it works so well is that when you are tracking your calories, you can look at your average over the week. But on those days where you're like super motivated, feeling great, you can go to the lower end of your range, which is going to be kind of the max deficit really that I think you'd want to be in. And the upper end of your range is going to be at or very close to maintenance. So then you go, okay, on the days where I'm not feeling so great, I might end up nearer there. Or maybe when I'm a bit more active or hormonal or all of those things going on, I might be there. And then if you're hitting around the middle of your range as an average over the course of the week, bish, bash, bosh, you're doing really well. There's no pass or fail mark here. But I do think having a backup for when you're not feeling like you can track, or you're staying with family, or all of these other things are going on, is key. It's just having the opportunity to pause and make a choice. Now, fat loss does feel easier when we feel calmer. It's not when we're pushing harder. And there are some very small, tiny things that we can do that we might not even realize that actually do impact fat loss. Things that if I was talking about them, you'd be like, what is she on about? But fat loss feels easier when we feel calmer. And there are certain things that we do in order to lose weight that have us feeling better, have us feeling calmer. Exercise is one of them. But there are other things that when we're feeling a bit stressed and overwhelmed, they just slip, we stop doing them, and they don't even feel like they are connected to how we're feeling. Maybe it's your skincare routine. Maybe it's spritzing some perfume on and making yourself smell nice. Maybe it's putting on your favorite clothes, or journaling, writing down some gratitude. All of these things can make a difference to how we feel. I know for me, I like to do that one thing each evening to make tomorrow easier. And the minimum I have with that is getting the tea ready. Now, I have confused people in the past by having them think that I'm putting a tea bag in a mug with some milk, whatever, in the morning. No, like, I love tea. I drink black tea, and I have a cup of tea every morning, and I do loose leaf tea. And I've got this tea maker, and I make it the night before, and I put the tea leaves into the like nest thing. And then I set the timer on, put the water and set the timer. And then in the morning, it will dip it down into the water, let it brew for a set amount of time, and then bring it back up. And then when I come downstairs in the morning, there is a warm, because it's on the keep warm function, tea pot made, and I can pour it. But actually, I have been having a big glass of water before my tea every morning as well. But that tea, it tastes so good, so good. But the thing about it, and this is something I didn't take into consideration, on its own, you think it's not connected to fat loss. But when I'm getting that tea ready in the evening, I'm clearing the counter, I'm setting up for the morning, I'm thinking ahead the next day, even if it's unintentionally, I'm starting to wind down. And then in the morning, I've already done one thing that makes me feel like I'm winning already. It makes me feel calmer before the days even began. Now we can take it a step further if we want to. And I've got a member who every evening she gets her frozen fruit out for her breakfast the next day. That is another tiny habit that can have a huge ripple effect, because she's making a decision about breakfast in advance. She's making it easier. So she's committing beforehand, and she's winding down as well with that. So have a little think for you. What is one thing you can do each evening that will have you feeling calmer when you wake up in the morning? Have you feeling like you're already winning the day? Maybe it's getting some clothes out ready. Maybe it's getting something ready for work or for your kids, so that you know that they've got everything they need in the morning. Because I know that when I wake up and things haven't gone to plan, maybe the children have lost something and you're racing around trying to get everyone out the door, it feels like the rest of the day follows like that as well. And that is another reason why my mornings have changed a little bit. I get up quite early now, arguably with the way that my sleep has been recently, maybe a little bit too early. But the reason I started getting up earlier, so I was getting up at 6. That felt good. I'm now getting up at 5:30. I'm doing the PJ workouts at 6:30 with members. But the routine that I absolutely love is the fact that I get up and I will start getting some breakfast ready for my kids. And the only reason I do that is because it can become this mad frenzy. And if they only have to focus on getting themselves ready and I've got other bits ready, it just feels calmer. And then the rest of the day seems to follow in that same vein. The other habit that I think can make a massive difference is starting the day with some form of movement. Now, we've been doing the PJ workouts with members, like I said, that can have such a ripple effect. They're often then going on and doing more later in the day than they would have done before. And it's not because they're saying to themselves, I should do this. It's because they want to do it, because they're feeling more motivated by that action they've taken earlier in the day. Also, movement has been shown to improve our mood. So we're getting up and we're doing 5 minutes of movement. You might go out and do a 5-minute walk, or just something. You might dance to your favorite song on the radio in the kitchen, whatever it is. But see if you can just put in a little bit of movement to get you moving, to get you energized, to get you feeling good. That is another thing that can make you feel so great and has a massive ripple effect and can make fat loss feel easier. And then you can measure your progress on that. Be proud of showing up each time you do it. And that is a really lovely one, because you're not saying you have to wake up each morning and do a full workout. You're saying to yourself, the minimum I'm going to do is just 5 minutes. It might be that I'm going out some days and doing a walk and it ends up being longer. That's fine. But other days you'll say to yourself, I'm going to do 5 minutes. And then you might finish that 5 minutes and decide you're going to do more. Again, that's fine too, but it's not the expectation. And then we can think about our environment and how we can make it easier to achieve our goals, so that you're not just relying on willpower. So if you're struggling with sleep, for example, but you're taking your phone upstairs and you're scrolling through Instagram and you're then finding it hard to put that phone down, it's just this cycle, then having that phone there is just going to be relying on willpower. That phone wants you to stay on it. You know, they're designed to make us go back for more. So we can look at ways as to how we can change that environment so that is easier. And that might be that you leave the phone downstairs on charge, or that you put it in a different room, or that you put it on the other side of the room and you set a condition that you are not going to be looking at it when you're in bed. Ideally, it would be out the room, but I do know that there are people out there who, you know, have older kids that are out and about, might need to call them, or family members who are a bit more vulnerable and might need to call them. So I do know that that isn't always easy, but it is worth considering. And another example of our environment is it could be that you want to go out for a walk every morning, but then you find yourself getting sucked into your emails. I'm going to blame phones again, but it could be computer, whatever it is. And in that situation, you can switch it round. So the first thing that you see when you wake up is your shoes and the clothes you want to go out for a walk in. and the email, wherever you're seeing those, gets put further away. There was a book I read a long time ago. I can't even remember the name of it, but I remember them saying about, I think it was 20 seconds, make it take more than 20 seconds to do the thing that you don't want to do, that kind of unhelpful habit, and less than that to do the thing that you do want to do. So if you don't want to watch TV, but you do want to go for a walk, then get the shoes out, put the remote upstairs earlier in the day. If you did want to start journaling, for example, then you could put your notepad or whatever it is you're journaling on your pillow in the morning or when you remember. And then again, removing the other distractions from that environment. It's also important to remember that where our focus goes, our energy flows, and we can be quite unkind to ourselves. And this is why I always encourage my members, and we've got a whole forum based around this, on looking at the things that have gone well. And we call it the 3 Wins Forum inside the Ruth McFit app. And with this, we look at 3 things that have gone well that day, and then we set 3 things to focus on the next day. They aren't always, when we're reading through them, fat loss focused. Often they will be things that they're doing because it makes them feel good, but it's getting them thinking about tomorrow, but also focusing on the things that have gone well. And sometimes the things that have gone well aren't things that you might think have gone well. So even the harder, more challenging times can be something we can celebrate as a win because of what we've learned from them. So this didn't go to plan, but I know that next time I need to do this, and that can be something to celebrate because you've taken that time to reflect and you've learned on what does and doesn't work. You've not run away, you've been curious, you've reflected, you've taken time to understand. But honestly, taking a moment to see how well things are going, even if it's tiny, keeps you going, keeps you noticing, keeps you reflecting. And that is so much better than constantly being focused on the outcome. So make it easier by giving yourself time to look at what's working and what is going well, and be proud of yourself for the changes you're making. And I feel like I've talked at you for quite a long time, but it is quite an in-depth subject. And I know that afterwards I'm going to come away and think, oh gosh, I should have spoken about this and that, but they'll all come up on other podcasts as well. But after this episode, I hope you can go away and think, actually, I can lose weight without losing my mind. And these are the areas, just to summarize again, that I would focus on. Firstly, get clear on your goals and think about what those minimums and those actions look like. So what can you do? You can break this down into movement, nutrition, and mindset if you want, and then look at what you can manage on those hardest days and make sure they're things that you really deep down say, I can and I will commit to that. If it makes it easier, because there's part of you thinking, oh, I still feel a bit overwhelmed by it, pick one thing to begin with. And don't worry about the fact that things might take a little bit longer. You're still making change, and that is incredible. The next thing to remember is that life is not going to be the same every day. And you might have periods where fat loss doesn't feel like it's your main focus, and that is okay too. But at those points, that's where those minimums are going to come in very handy. And also know that these things might change. You can relook at those goals, those focuses, and adapt and adjust them. You can learn from what has or hasn't worked. Focus on those things that have you feeling calmer and more in control. And for me, like I said, it's doing one thing each evening to make tomorrow easier, a little bit of morning movement, and those things that have the biggest ripple effect. Do things because they make you feel good. And remember also that when you are feeling overwhelmed and everything's bubbling around you, it's often because you don't feel like you have a plan. You don't feel like you're in control. And at that point, I really want you to remember that stopping is better than adding more onto your to-do list. Stop and give yourself time to make a calm plan. I'm also going to include a link to the calorie range calculator that I have in the show notes that you can go and fill in if you do want to have an idea of what your lower end of your range might be and the higher end of your range, so that if you are tracking calories, you can focus on hitting the middle of that. And that can be really helpful for the all or nothing. But don't forget, it's not just about hitting those calories. You could lose weight just eating chocolate, but you're going to feel pretty shit doing it. And we want to think about those foods that are going to have us feeling fuller for longer. Things like plenty of protein, plenty of fiber, and eating meals rather than just relying on snacks in the day. But all of this feels so much easier when you feel calmer and in control. And I could go on about this all day. I could look at other stress factors and the impact that stress has on your life. But again, to begin with, just focus on those small habits that can make a massive difference. Until next time, Goodbye. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, do make sure that you're following or that you've subscribed so you don't miss out on the next one. And if you want some support putting this into practice, then come and join us inside the Ruth McFit app. This is where we focus on building strength, confidence, and consistency in a way that feels good and that fits your life. All the links will be in the show notes.